The soles of my sneakers were held together with super glue and prayer. I could feel the cold Chicago pavement through the cracks as I stood outside Sal's Diner on West Madison Street, staring at my phone screen through the rain. The text message glowed back at me like a death sentence. Final eviction notice. Payment of $1,200 required within 48 hours or vacate premises. No exceptions. It was Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, 9:47 in the evening. The storm had been raging since 6, and my shift didn't end until midnight. I shoved the phone into my apron pocket and pushed through the diner door. The bell jingled. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. The air smelled like burnt coffee and fryer grease. My feet ached. My back screamed. But I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you're a single mother with 48 hours until homelessness. My name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm 26 years old. I work double shifts at a diner that pays $9 an hour plus tips. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Zoe who has chronic asthma and lungs that don't work the way they should. Her medication costs $312 every 2 weeks. I'm behind on rent by 3 months. I'm behind on everything. But I keep moving because the moment I stop, we drown. I walked through the kitchen, past the line cooks who didn't look at me, past Brad, the manager, who hated me for reasons I stopped trying to understand, and into the tiny back office that doubled as storage. Zoe was sitting on the floor, surrounded by broken crayons and printer paper, drawing pictures of houses with big yards and dogs. She looked up when I entered. Her brown eyes were exactly like her father's, the father she never met. The father who died 7 years ago in a car accident 3 months before she was born. She coughed. It was the dry, rattling cough that made my stomach drop every single time. I knelt beside her and pulled the inhaler from my bag. I shook it. Empty. I pressed it anyway, hoping for a miracle. Nothing came out. Zoe looked at me with those trusting eyes. "It's okay, Mama. I'm okay." She was lying. I was lying. We were both pretending that everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. I kissed her forehead. It was warm. Too warm. I didn't have health insurance. I didn't have money for the emergency room. I didn't have money for anything. The prescription refill cost $53. I had $22 in my checking account. Payday was Friday. Zoe needed the inhaler tonight. I stood up. I smoothed my stained uniform. I walked back onto the floor and tied my apron tighter, hiding the holes in my shirt. I needed tips. I needed generous customers. I needed a miracle. Instead, I got Elias Vance. The black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up outside the diner at exactly 10:14. I know because I was refilling coffee for a trucker when the entire restaurant went silent. Everyone turned to look. A car like that didn't belong on West Madison Street. A car like that didn't stop at places like Sal's Diner. But it did, and when the rear door opened and a man in a charcoal gray suit stepped out into the rain, I felt the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Brad materialized beside me so fast I jumped. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin through the uniform sleeve. "That's Elias Vance. Do you understand who that is?" I shook my head. Brad's face turned red. "He owns half of Chicago. He owns Vance Holdings. He owns buildings, hotels, and probably this block. If he complains, you're fired. If he leaves unhappy, you're fired. Do not mess this up, Maya." Brad shoved me toward the front door just as Elias Vance stepped inside. The bell jingled. Water dripped from his umbrella onto the cracked linoleum floor. He was tall. 65 years old, but standing like a man 20 years younger. His hair was silver. His eyes were pale blue and cold as winter ice. His suit probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He looked around the diner like he'd stepped into a sewer. His lip curled slightly. Disgust, superiority, contempt. He sat down in my section without waiting to be seated. Booth 7. The vinyl was torn and patched with duct tape. He sat anyway, carefully, as if the poverty might be contagious. I walked over, I pulled out my notepad, I smiled the smile I'd perfected over 3 years of service work, the smile that said, "I'm happy to serve you," even when my daughter was coughing in the back room and my rent was due in 48 hours. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Sal's. Can I start you with something to drink?" He didn't look at me. He was scrolling through his phone, an iPhone 15 Pro Max in a leather case that probably cost more than my sneakers, my uniform, and my rent combined. He spoke without looking up. "Hot water, lemon. The water must be between 190 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, not lukewarm. Do you understand?" I wrote it down. "Yes, sir. Anything else?" "I'll have the soup, but I need to see the ingredients first. I don't eat gluten, dairy, or anything processed." I wanted to laugh. We were in a diner that served frozen vegetables and canned soup, but I nodded. "I'll check with the kitchen, sir." I walked away. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of everything pressing down on me like a physical force. I brought him the hot water with lemon. I measured the temperature with the kitchen thermometer because I knew he would send it back if it wasn't perfect. 196 degrees. I set it down in front of him. He touched the cup with one finger, frowned, pushed it away. "Too cold. Redo it." I took the cup. I walked back to the kitchen. I microwaved the water for 8 more seconds. I brought it back. He touched it again, nodded. I took his soup order. I brought him the vegetable soup. He took 1 spoonful, pushed it away. "This tastes like it came from a can." It did, but I smiled. "I'm sorry, sir. Would you like something else?" "Redo it. Add fresh herbs. Make it from scratch." We didn't have fresh herbs. We didn't make anything from scratch, but I went into the kitchen and begged the line cook to add parsley and heat it in a different pot. I brought it back. Elias took another spoonful, swallowed, said nothing. He ate half the bowl in silence while talking loudly on his phone about liquidating assets and cutting dead weight from his portfolio. He talked about people like they were numbers. He talked about buildings like they were toys. He never once looked at me. I refilled his water 3 times. I brought him crackers he didn't ask for. I cleared his plates the moment he was finished. I did everything perfectly because I needed this tip. I needed $50, just $50 to buy Zoe's inhaler tonight and keep her breathing until Friday. And then Elias Vance knocked over his tea. It happened fast. He was gesturing while on the phone and his hand hit the cup. Hot tea, Earl Grey, 180 degrees, spilled across the table toward his lap. I didn't think, I just moved. I reached out and grabbed the cup mid-fall, stopping the boiling liquid from hitting his expensive suit pants. The tea splashed over my hand instead. It burned. It burned so badly that tears filled my eyes instantly. But I didn't scream. I didn't drop the cup. I set it down carefully on the table and pulled my hand back. The skin was already turning red. Blisters were forming across my knuckles. Elias Vance looked at my hand. Then he looked up at my face. For 1 second, just one, something flickered in his cold blue eyes. Recognition? Surprise? I don't know, but then it was gone. He looked back at his phone. "Clean it up." That was all he said. No thank you, no apology, just a command. I grabbed a rag from my apron and cleaned up the spilled tea with my good hand, while my burned hand throbbed. Elias finished his phone call. He stood up. He buttoned his coat. He walked to the register. Brad rang him up personally, smiling like a dog begging for scraps. The bill was $48.50. Elias handed over a black American Express without looking at the total. Brad swiped it. Elias signed the receipt. He put the pen down. He walked out. The bell jingled. The Rolls-Royce drove away. The rain kept falling. I stood at the register, staring at Brad. My heart was pounding. Brad handed me the receipt. I looked down at the tip line. Tip, $0, 0 cents. Nothing. He had left me nothing. The receipt fell from my burned hand onto the counter. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger, not even surprise, just a deep, hollow devastation that made my knees weak. I had served him perfectly. I had burned myself saving him from discomfort, and he had left me nothing. Not because he forgot, not because he was careless, but because to him, I was nothing. My pain didn't matter. My effort didn't matter. I didn't matter. I walked out the window at the taillights disappearing into the rain. Tears filled my eyes. I wiped them away before Brad could see. I walked back to booth 7 to clear the table. My hands were shaking. My burned hand was screaming. I stacked the plates roughly, angrily, letting them clatter. I didn't care anymore. I had failed. Zoe wouldn't get her inhaler tonight. We'd be homeless by Thursday. I had tried so hard, and it hadn't mattered. I lifted the dinner plate, and that's when I saw it.
There was something under the plate. Not money, a folded white linen napkin, and resting on top of the napkin was a photograph. Old, faded, creased down the middle like it had been carried in a wallet for years. I set the plates down. I picked up the photograph with my trembling, burned hand. The moment I looked at it, the world stopped. It was a photo of a beach, somewhere warm, somewhere with white sand and blue water. There were 2 people in the photo, laughing, arms around each other. A young white man with dark curly hair and bright eyes, and a young black woman with box braids and a sundress, grinning at the camera like she'd just been told the best joke in the world. The woman in the photo was me, 7 years younger, 20 pounds lighter, happy in a way I'd forgotten I could be. The man in the photo was Leo, my husband, my love, the father of my child, the man who died on Interstate 90 in a snowstorm 3 months before Zoe was born, the man whose family I never met because he told me they disowned him when he married me, the man whose father called me trash and cut him off without $1 because I was black and poor and unworthy of the family name. I dropped the photograph. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold it. I picked up the napkin. It was heavy, expensive linen, the kind you don't find in diners, and written across it in thick black ink were words that made my entire body go numb. I told him he was throwing his life away on trash. I told him you would ruin him. I came here today to prove I was right, to prove you were weak. But I saw the burn on your hand. I saw the little girl in the back room with his eyes. I was wrong. E.V. I read it 3 times, 4 times. The words didn't change. Elias Vance. E.V. The man who had just left me a $0 tip was Leo's father. He was Zoe's grandfather. The man who let his own son die in poverty because he was too proud and too racist to forgive him for loving me. He had come here tonight, not by accident, on purpose, to test me, to judge me, to see if I was the trash he'd always believed I was. And he had changed his mind. I turned the napkin over. Taped to the back was a check, a personal check from Elias Vance, made out to me. The amount was written in clear, precise handwriting. $50,000. The memo line read, "For the inhaler." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. $50,000, enough to pay rent for a year, enough to buy Zoe's medication for the next decade, enough to fix my car, replace my shoes, buy her a real coat for winter, enough to survive, enough to breathe. I pressed the check to my chest and sobbed. Right there in the middle of the diner, I sobbed so hard my ribs ached. Relief, shock, gratitude, grief, all of it crashing over me at once. And then Brad ripped the check out of my hands. What the hell is this? Brad was standing over me, staring at the check with wide eyes. He read the amount. His face went red, then white, then red again. He looked at me like I'd just committed murder. Where did you get this? Did you steal this from him? No, he left it. It's mine. Elias Vance doesn't leave $50,000 checks for waitresses, Maya. You hustled him. You scammed him. I knew you were trash. Give it back! Brad, please, that's mine. My daughter needs... I'm calling the police, and until they get here, this stays locked up. Brad marched to the back office. I followed, screaming, begging, crying. He shoved the check into the safe and slammed it shut. He spun the lock. He turned to face me. You're fired. Get out of my diner before I have you arrested. Brad, please, you don't understand. That man is my daughter's grandfather. He left me that money because... I don't care. Get out. Now, before I call the cops. I stood there, frozen, staring at the safe. Everything I needed was locked inside. $50,000, the difference between life and death, and I couldn't touch it. Brad grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. I fought, I clawed, I screamed. The other waitresses watched in silence. No one ever helped. No one ever helped. Brad threw me out into the rain. I hit the wet pavement hard. My burned hand scraped against the concrete. I scrambled to my feet and ran back inside to grab Zoe. She was still in the back office, crying now, terrified by the shouting. I picked her up. She was so light, too light. I wrapped my coat around her and ran out into the storm. We had no money, no job, no home in 48 hours. But I had the note, I had the photograph, and I had the name, Elias Vance. I was going to find him, and he was going to help us, because I wasn't trash. I was Leo's wife. I was Zoe's mother, and I deserved to be seen. If you're still watching, hit that like button, because what happens next will change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of our apartment, the apartment we'd be evicted from in 36 hours, with Zoe curled up beside me on a pile of blankets, and I stared at the photograph until my eyes burned. Leo, smiling, happy, alive. I traced his face with my finger and tried to remember what his laugh sounded like. It had been 7 years. His voice was fading from my memory. But his eyes, those brown eyes that Zoe inherited, those I could never forget. Elias Vance was Leo's father. That meant Zoe had family, real family. Family with money and power and resources. Family who could help us. But it also meant Elias was the man who had called me trash. The man who told Leo he was ruining his life by marrying me. The man who refused to come to our wedding or acknowledge our existence. The man who let his own son die without ever speaking to him again. And yet he had left me $50,000. The note haunted me. I saw the burn on your hand. I saw the little girl in the back room with his eyes. I was wrong. E.V. He had come to the diner to prove something, to confirm his prejudice, to see me fail. But something had changed his mind. The burn, the sacrifice, Zoe. He had seen us and he had been moved. That had to mean something. That had to mean he was reachable. I kissed Zoe's forehead. She was wheezing in her sleep. Her inhaler was still empty. I had to get that check from Brad. But I knew Brad wouldn't give it to me. He'd probably already called the police or torn it up out of spite. No, if I wanted help, I had to go to the source. I had to go to Elias Vance himself. At 6 in the morning, I left Zoe with Mrs. Chen, the neighbor in apartment 3B who sometimes babysat when I worked nights. I told her I'd be back by noon. I didn't tell her we were being evicted. I didn't tell her I was going to confront a billionaire. I just kissed my daughter and left. I took the bus to downtown Chicago. The address for Vance Holdings was easy to find. 334 South Wabash Avenue, a glass tower that reflected the gray November sky like a mirror. 47 floors of steel and money. I stood on the sidewalk staring up at it, feeling like an ant about to challenge a mountain. My sneakers were still glued together. My coat was threadbare. I looked like exactly what I was, a desperate, exhausted woman with nothing left to lose. I walked through the revolving doors into the lobby. It was all white marble and chrome. Men in suits moved past me without seeing me. Women in heels clicked across the floor like they owned time itself. I walked to the security desk. 2 guards in black uniforms looked at me like I'd tracked mud across their clean floor. "Can I help you?" The older guard's tone made it clear he didn't want to help me at all. "I need to see Elias Vance." The younger guard smirked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have this." I pulled out the photograph of Leo. My hands were shaking. "This is his son. I'm the mother of his granddaughter. Tell him I'm here. Tell him Maya Rodriguez is here, or I go to the press." The guards looked at each other. The older one picked up the phone. He spoke quietly, turned away so I couldn't hear. He hung up, nodded to the younger guard. "Someone's coming down." I waited. My heart was hammering. I pressed the photograph against my chest like a shield. The elevator dinged. The doors opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, handsome in that polished, expensive way. 40 years old maybe. Dark hair slicked back, blue eyes like Elias's, but colder, crueler. A gray suit that fit perfectly. He walked toward me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maya Rodriguez?" "Yes, who are you?" "Gregory Vance, Elias's nephew, vice president of operations." He extended his hand. I didn't shake it. His smile tightened. "I understand you're claiming to be connected to the family." "I'm not claiming anything. I was married to Leo Vance. This is our photo. My daughter, Zoe, is his granddaughter. Elias knows. He came to see me last night. He left me a check, and I need—" Gregory laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that echoed through the lobby. People turned to stare. Gregory stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Leo was a disgrace. He threw away his life for a piece of—" He stopped himself, smiled again. "Elias doesn't want to see you. The check he left was go-away money. Consider it charity. But if you contact this family again, if you show up here again, if you go to the press, we will bury you. We will sue you for extortion. We will take your daughter and prove you're an unfit mother." The blood drained from my face. "You can't." "We can. We have the best lawyers in Chicago. You have nothing. So take the hint, Maya. Disappear." Gregory reached out and plucked the photograph from my hands before I could react. He looked at it, sneered, and then he tore it in half, right down the middle, right through Leo's smiling face. He dropped the pieces on the floor. "Leo is dead. You are nothing. Leave before I have security remove you." I stared at the torn photograph on the marble floor. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurring. Gregory turned and walked back to the elevator. The security guards moved toward me. I dropped to my knees and picked up the pieces of the photograph with trembling fingers. I held them together, trying to make Leo's face whole again, but it was ruined, just like everything else. The guards grabbed my arms and dragged me toward the door. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just let them pull me outside and dump me on the sidewalk like trash. The revolving door spun shut behind me. I sat there on the cold concrete, holding the torn photo, and I cried. Not quiet tears, loud, ugly, broken sobs that made people cross the street to avoid me. I had lost the check. I had lost the photograph. I had lost my job. And now I knew that Elias didn't want to see me. Gregory had made that clear. I was nothing. I was nobody. And Zoe and I were going to drown. But I didn't know what was happening 47 floors above me. I didn't know that Elias Vance was sitting in his corner office, staring out at the city, coughing into a handkerchief. I didn't know that his assistant, a man named Richard who'd been on Gregory's payroll for 3 years, was standing beside him with a tablet. "Sir, the bank called. The check you wrote last night was cashed this morning at a liquor store on West Madison." Elias looked up. His pale blue eyes were tired, disappointed. "She cashed it already?" "Yes, sir. And according to the manager at Sal's Diner, she caused a scene, was fired for theft, and hasn't been seen since. Gregory spoke with her this morning when she tried to access the building. He said she was laughing about the money. She called it easy." Elias turned back to the window. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. "I knew it. I wanted to believe, but I knew." His voice was barely a whisper. "She took the money and ran. She doesn't care about the child. She's just like I thought she was." Richard nodded. "What would you like me to do, sir?" "Schedule a meeting with my attorney, tonight. I want to change my will. Everything goes to Gregory. He's earned it." Richard smiled. "Of course, sir, right away." He left the office. The door clicked shut. Elias sat down heavily in his leather chair. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out another photograph. This one was older, a young boy with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. Leo at age 7. Elias traced the boy's face with one finger. "I failed you," he whispered. "I was too proud, too stubborn, and now your daughter will grow up without me, just like you did, because I chose hate over love, and I can't fix it now." He put the photo away. He looked out at the city, and he made the worst decision of his life. He decided to believe the lie.
2 days later, I was living in a homeless shelter on South State Street with Zoe. The shelter smelled like disinfectant and desperation. We slept on cots in a room with 30 other families. Zoe didn't complain. She never complained. She just held my hand and asked when we could go home. I lied and told her soon. Her cough was getting worse. The wheezing had turned into gasping. She couldn't breathe lying down. I propped her up with rolled blankets and stayed awake all night listening to her struggle for air. By Thursday morning, her lips were turning blue. I wrapped her in my coat and carried her 6 blocks to Mercy Hospital. She was so light in my arms. Too light. The ER admitted her immediately. They put her on oxygen. They ran tests. A doctor with kind eyes and tired hands told me Zoe needed specialized treatment, a nebulizer treatment that cost $800. I didn't have $800. I didn't have $8. The doctor looked at me the way everyone had been looking at me lately, with pity and frustration. "We can't discharge her until she's stable, but without insurance or payment, we can't provide the advanced care she needs. I'm sorry." I sat beside Zoe's hospital bed and held her small hand while machines beeped around us. She was sleeping, her chest rising and falling in shallow, painful breaths. I thought about Elias Vance in his tower. I thought about the $50,000 locked in Brad's safe. I thought about Gregory tearing up Leo's photo and calling me nothing. And then I remembered something Leo had told me a long time ago. We were lying in bed in our tiny studio apartment back when he was alive and everything was possible. He was telling me stories about his childhood, about his mother who died of cancer when he was 12, about his father who became cold and distant after she passed. "My father goes to St. Jude's Cathedral every Thursday at 6 in the evening," Leo had said. "He lights a candle for my mother and prays. It's the only time he's ever soft, the only time he's ever human." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:37. Thursday. I kissed Zoe's forehead. I told the nurse I'd be back in 2 hours, and I ran out of the hospital into the rain. St. Jude's Cathedral was a massive Gothic structure on East 9th Street. Stone walls, stained glass windows, spires reaching toward gray clouds. I burst through the heavy wooden doors at 5:53, soaking wet and gasping. The inside of the church was quiet. Rows of wooden pews, candles flickering in alcoves, the smell of incense and old wood. And there, kneeling in the front pew, alone, was Elias Vance. He was wearing a long black coat. His silver hair was damp from the rain. His head was bowed. His hands were clasped in prayer. He looked smaller here, older, almost fragile.
I marched down the aisle. My wet sneakers squeaked against the stone floor. Elias didn't turn around. I stopped 3 feet behind him. "You think you can buy me off?" My voice echoed through the cathedral. Elias's back stiffened. He stood slowly and turned to face me. His pale blue eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You," his voice was ice, "you took the money and ran." "What money? I never got your money." "Don't lie to me. The bank confirmed it. You cashed the check at a liquor store. My nephew told me you laughed about it. You called it easy money." I stared at him, my hands balled into fists. "Your nephew is a liar. He threw me out of your building. He tore up the picture of Leo. Your check is locked in a diner safe because my manager accused me of stealing it. I haven't seen a single dollar." Elias's expression flickered. Doubt, confusion. "That's impossible. Richard said—" "I don't care what Richard said. I don't care what Gregory said. My daughter, your granddaughter, is in the emergency room right now struggling to breathe, and you are here praying to a God who knows you're a liar." The words exploded out of me like a bomb. Elias recoiled like I'd slapped him. The cathedral was silent except for my ragged breathing and the sound of rain against stained glass. "Zoe is sick?" My voice cracked. Tears streamed down my face. "She has Leo's lungs. She has asthma. She can't breathe. She needs treatment I can't afford. And she's dying because you were too proud to love us, because you looked at my skin and decided I was trash before you ever knew my name." Elias stared at me, really looked at me. I saw his hands tremble. I saw something crack in his cold blue eyes. He looked down at his own hands, then back at me. "Your hand, the burn?" I held up my scarred, blistered hand. "From saving you, from protecting you, because that's what I do. I protect people, even people who treat me like I'm invisible." Elias's face crumpled. For a moment, the Ice King melted. He looked like an old man who just realized he'd spent his entire life walking in the wrong direction. His voice broke. "I went to that diner to test you, to prove Leo was wrong, to prove you were weak. But I saw you work. I saw you smile even though you were exhausted. I saw you burn yourself for a stranger. I saw your daughter in the back room and she had his eyes, my son's eyes. And then I realized I was the weak one. I was the one who threw away everything that mattered." He took a step toward me. I didn't move. "Take me to her," Elias said. It wasn't a request, it was a command, but his voice was shaking. "Please, take me to my granddaughter." We drove to Mercy Hospital in the back of Elias's Rolls-Royce. The driver navigated through traffic while Elias sat rigid beside me, staring straight ahead. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to the hospital administrator, demanding the best pediatric pulmonologist in Chicago be brought in immediately. The second was to his attorney, telling him to cancel the will meeting. The third was to someone named Richard. "Richard, you lied to me." Elias's voice was cold, deadly. "The woman never cashed the check. My nephew intercepted her. You've been feeding me false information. You're fired. Security will escort you out tonight." He hung up. He looked at me. "I'm sorry. I should have come to you myself. I should have—" He trailed off, shook his head. "I've spent 7 years regretting the things I said to my son. I won't spend another day regretting what I failed to do for his daughter." We arrived at the hospital at 7:16. Elias walked through the ER like he owned it. Doctors scrambled. Within 20 minutes, Zoe was moved to a private room on the pediatric floor. A team of specialists arrived. They administered treatments, they adjusted medications, they brought in machines I didn't recognize. And slowly, Zoe's breathing steadied. The blue faded from her lips. She opened her eyes. She saw me first, smiled. "Hi, Mama." Then she looked at the tall, silver-haired man standing nervously in the doorway. "Who's that?" Elias stepped into the room. He moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something sacred. He knelt beside the bed so he was eye level with Zoe, his pale blue eyes filled with tears. I'm your grandpa." Zoe tilted her head. Mama said you were lost. Elias looked at me, then back at Zoe. A tear rolled down his lined face. I was, but I'm not anymore. Your mama found me. Zoe smiled. She reached out and touched his hand. I'm glad. Grandpas are important. Elias broke. He put his head down on the bed and sobbed. His shoulders shook. The Ice King completely melted, and all that was left was a broken old man who had finally realized what he'd lost. I stood there, crying too, because this moment was everything Leo had wanted: family, love, forgiveness. And then the door burst open. Gregory stormed in with two men in suits, lawyers by the look of them. His face was red with fury. Uncle Elias, what are you doing? This woman is manipulating you. She's a con artist. She's... Enough. Elias stood. He was taller than Gregory now, stronger. The softness was gone. The Ice King was back, but this time he was protecting instead of destroying. I checked the security footage from the lobby, Gregory. I saw you tear up the photograph. I spoke with the manager at Sal's diner. He confirmed you called him and told him to lock up the check and fire Maya. You sabotaged her. You lied to me, and you did it because you wanted my company. You wanted my money. You were willing to let my granddaughter suffer to secure your inheritance. Gregory's face went pale. Uncle, You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. If you contest this, I will have you prosecuted for fraud. Do you understand? The lawyers stepped back. Gregory opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at me with pure hatred. Then he turned and stormed out of the room. The lawyers followed. The door slammed shut. Elias sat down heavily in the chair beside Zoe's bed. He looked exhausted, defeated, but also lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying a weight for 7 years and finally set it down. I can't bring Leo back, he said quietly, but I can be here for his daughter, if you'll let me. I looked at Zoe, sleeping peacefully now, her small hand still holding Elias's. I looked at the machines keeping her alive, and I looked at this old man who had been so wrong for so long, but finally trying to be right. Yes, I whispered, you can stay.
1 week later, the black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up outside Sal's diner on West Madison Street. It was Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, 11:30 in the morning. The lunch rush was just starting. I watched from the passenger seat as Brad looked out the window, saw the car, and smiled. He probably thought Elias was coming back. He probably thought he could hustle him again. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing a tailored black suit that Elias had bought me. A real suit with clean lines and fabric that didn't pill. My hair was done. My burned hand was bandaged but healing. I looked like a different person. I felt like a different person. Elias stepped out behind me. Together we walked through the door. The bell jingled. The diner went silent. Brad's smile faltered when he saw me. It disappeared completely when he realized I was with Elias. Mr. Vance, sir, welcome back. Brad. Elias's voice was cold. I need the check you confiscated from Maya Rodriguez last Tuesday night. Brad's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. The $50,000 check I left for her. You accused her of theft and locked it in your safe. I want it now. Brad stammered. That check was... I was protecting your interests, Mr. Vance. I thought... You thought wrong. Open the safe. Brad led us to the back office, hands shaking. He spun the dial. The safe opened. He pulled out the check and handed it to me. I held it in my hands. It was real. It was still here. $50,000. Enough to change everything. Elias took an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Brad. This is a purchase agreement for this building. I bought it this morning. Cash sale. You're fired, Brad. Effective immediately. Maya is the new owner. Brad's mouth fell open. You can't... I can, and I did. You have 1 hour to clear out your things. Security will escort you. 2 men in suits appeared in the doorway. Brad looked at me, then at Elias, then back at me.
his face twisted with rage and humiliation, but he didn't say anything. He just grabbed his jacket and walked out. The bell jingled one last time. He was gone. I stood in the diner I'd worked in for 3 years, the place that had chewed me up and spit me out, the place where I'd burned my hand and been called trash, and now it was mine. Elias put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to keep running it. We can sell it if you want, or renovate it, or turn it into something else entirely. This is yours, Maya. You decide." I looked around the diner, at the torn vinyl booths, the cracked linoleum, the flickering fluorescent lights. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. "I'm keeping it," I said, "but I'm changing everything. New name, new menu, living wages for every worker, health insurance, respect." Elias smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen on his face. "That sounds perfect." 3 months later, on a cold February morning, I stood in front of the diner with Zoe and Elias. The old Sal's Diner sign was gone. In its place was a new sign, hand-painted in gold letters, Leo's Place. Zoe held my hand and Elias's hand, forming a chain. She was healthy now. Her inhaler was always full. Her cheeks had color. She laughed easily. She called Elias Grandpa without hesitation, and he called her Sweetheart like it was the most natural thing in the world. Inside, the diner had been transformed. New booths, new floors, new everything. But it still felt like home. I'd hired every waitress who'd been fired by Brad. I'd hired line cooks who needed second chances. I'd created the kind of place I'd always wished existed, a place where people were seen. Elias had paid for everything, but he'd made it clear this was mine. He'd set up a trust for Zoe's education. He'd bought us a house in a safe neighborhood with a yard and a dog. He'd given us everything Leo would have wanted us to have. But more than that, he'd given us himself, his time, his attention, his love. We stood there in the cold, looking at the sign. Zoe tugged on my hand. "Mama, why is it called Leo's Place?" I knelt down so I was eye level with her. "Because your daddy loved good food and good people, and he would have loved this place. He would have been proud of us." Zoe smiled. "I think he's watching." "I think so too, baby." Elias cleared his throat. When I looked up, his pale blue eyes were wet. "I spent 7 years hating myself for what I said to Leo. I told him he was throwing his life away, but I was wrong. He didn't throw his life away. He built something beautiful. He built you, Maya, and he built her." He looked at Zoe. "And now I get to be part of that. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it." I stood up. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You're here now. That's what matters." We walked inside together. The bell above the door jingled. Customers were already waiting. People who'd heard about the new diner with the kind owner and the fair wages. People who wanted to support something good. I tied on my apron, but this time it was different. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I was building, and I was doing it surrounded by people who saw me, who valued me, who loved me. Elias sat in booth 7, the same booth where he left me nothing 3 months ago. But this time, Zoe sat beside him, coloring on the paper menus and asking him about his day. He answered every question with patience and joy. The Ice King had melted completely, and in his place was a grandfather, a father, a man who had finally learned what mattered. I brought them hot chocolate and pancakes. Elias looked up at me and smiled. "Thank you, Maya." "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for showing me what Leo saw in you, for letting me be part of your family." I set down the plates. "You were always part of this family, Elias. You were just lost for a while, but we found you." He reached out and squeezed my hand, the burned hand, the hand that had saved him, the hand that had changed everything. Epilogue. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of our new house, watching Zoe play in the yard with the dog, a golden retriever she'd named Leo. Elias was sitting beside me in a rocking chair, reading the newspaper. He came over every Sunday for dinner. It had become tradition. My phone buzzed. A text message from the bank. The check had finally cleared. $50,000 deposited into my account. I'd left it uncashed for months, not because I didn't need it, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could survive without it, that I was more than the money, more than the tip line. But now, looking at the balance, I realized something. The money wasn't what saved us. Elias was. Not his wealth, not his power, but his willingness to change, his willingness to see me, to admit he was wrong, to choose love over pride. I thought about that night at the diner, the night he left me $0 and a note that changed everything. He came to prove I was trash, but instead he proved that people can change, that redemption is possible, that even the coldest heart can thaw if given the chance. Elias looked over at me. "What are you thinking about?" "That night at the diner." He nodded slowly. "I think about it too, every day." "Do you regret it?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I regret the 7 years before it. I regret the words I said to Leo. I regret the pride that kept me from knowing you and Zoe. But that night," he shook his head, "that night led me here, to this porch, to this family. So no, I don't regret it. I'm grateful for it." Zoe ran up to the porch, out of breath, the dog barking beside her. "Grandpa, come play fetch with us." Elias stood up, joints creaking, and smiled. "I'm coming, sweetheart." He walked down the steps into the yard. I watched him throw the ball for the dog, watched Zoe laugh and chase after it, watched this man who had been so cold become so warm, and I realized something. We're all capable of change. We're all capable of redemption. But it requires us to see each other, to truly see the burns we cause, to truly see the people we've dismissed. Elias Vance thought he could measure a person's worth by the size of their tip, but he learned that the richest hearts often live in the poorest bodies. He learned that love isn't something you buy, it's something you earn, and he learned that sometimes the people we think are beneath us are actually the ones holding us up. He left me $0 that night, but he left me something far more valuable, a note that said, "I was wrong." 3 words that changed 2 lives, 3 words that built a family, 3 words that proved that no one is beyond saving, not even the Ice King.
If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that everyone deserves to be seen, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to know they matter. And remember, the next time you sit down at a restaurant, look at the person serving you. Really look, because you never know whose life you might change with a single act of kindness or cruelty. The choice is always yours. Thank you for watching, and never forget, you are not what others see. You are what you choose to be.